This episode is brought to you by HASA. Liquid is clearly better. Liquid chlorine is the highest purity, works immediately, has no added cyanuric acid or calcium, and it will leave your pool safe, clean, and clear. And by the Bottom Feeder professional grade battery powered vacuum system. It sucks to clean pools, so cleaning pools sucks less. Get $100 off with code DVB100.
This episode is brought to you by Skimmer, the #1 pool service software in North America. With Skimmer, you can streamline your schedule, grow your revenue, and keep your customers coming back with 5-star service. Whether you're a one-person operation or an established team, Skimmer is your partner in success. Visit getskimmer.com/poolguy to try Skimmer for free for 30 days.
The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show.
Hi, welcome to the Pool Guy Podcast Show. In this episode, I'm going to go over some common things you may notice with your pool surface, and it's specific to pool surface type, so I'm going to go over some common things that you're going to see depending on what pool surface you have at your house and on your service accounts. Are you a pool service pro looking to take your business to the next level? Join the Pool Guy Coaching Program. Get expert advice, business tips, exclusive content, and get direct support from me. I'm a 35-year veteran in the industry. Whether you're starting out or scaling up, I've got the tools to help you succeed. Learn more at swimmingpoollearning.com. In my service area, most of the pools are either plaster or they're quartz or they're pebble tech, with a few vinyl pools here and there and some fiberglass pools. Not too many of those, so I would say 95%, maybe more than that, are just your standard cement or pebble tech type pools, which means that a lot of things that I see here are common, of course, everywhere, but for the pool types, I'll go over some typical things that I'll see on these pool surface types. The first thing to note, and this is what kind of inspired this podcast, is someone sent a photo of a pool. It's a gray colored plaster pool, and it had a lot of different kind of patterns in there, shapes, I guess, different colorations. And the question was, is this normal for a pool that was just put in 3 months ago? And my answer is yes, unfortunately, that's normal for that particular gray color plaster. Now, if you do pools in this area, it's probably one of the worst colored plasters you can ever use. It's a light gray plaster, and it probably looks great in the photos or great in the brochures or whatever, however they sell this to people. But in reality, it has the most mottling, the most scarring and etching and whatever of any plaster type out there. You'll see this also in a really dark blue or dark black colored plaster pool. Now, quartz is a little more uniformed. You're going to see maybe some discoloration in quartz, but not quite as bad as just plaster with the dye in it. And so what happens is that while they're doing the pool, you're going to see sometimes trowel markings in there. You'll see scars and etching. And then, of course, the mottling becomes something that can become extreme in the lighter color plaster, and in some cases the darker color plaster, because it's much more obvious and you can see it much easier than if it was a lighter color or just a white plaster pool. The term that we use here is mottling. It's basically what we call the uneven blotchy color variations on plaster. And I always tell people the same thing. If you have a house with a driveway, just stand there and look at your driveway, and you're going to see that the cement has different colors and variations and sometimes different patterns in there. If you're walking around your neighborhood and you have sidewalks that are cement, you'll notice the same thing, different colors and variations in each cement block. And that's just the nature of the product. And some of it's with inconsistent troweling when they're making the pool, doing the surface. They may be moving too slow, and that causes some of the things like that. Or even improper curing will cause that. And it's just sometimes just a natural variation of the surface itself. Now, one thing they used to put in pools, and if you ever had a pool from the 50s and 60s, you'll notice, or 70s, you'll notice that a white plaster pool is like it's a pure white plaster, like you never seen anything so nice before. Well, they used to put asbestos in there. This was the miracle product back before they knew that it caused serious lung problems and cancer. they put it in everything. I mean, they put it in drywall. They put it in, of course, the popcorn ceiling that everyone's familiar with. There's asbestos pads, I guess, or plates inside old gas heaters because they retain the heat really well. And they put it in pool plaster mainly as kind of a filler to increase the strength and reduce cracking. But I feel like it also led to a much purer looking plaster where you had a white uniform color. And of course, you can't add asbestos to plaster nowadays. That would not be good. It would not be, you probably would have zero customers wanting that. But it was something that really made that plaster look a lot better. So today's mix is a little different, and you're going to see this with any kind of color plaster. So the first thing I tell people is that if they're going to get a pool remodeled or built, just stay away from colored plaster altogether. It's not worth the headache, and you're not going to be happy with the look of it. You can't really acid wash it to cure it. You can maybe do a zero alkalinity if you have a builder that does that. Sometimes that alleviates some of the mottling and scratches, but not very often. And I would just avoid colored plaster altogether. There's much better alternatives than colored plaster. If you really want a gray or blue pool, then go with quartz. Quartz is much better because it'll kind of reduce any kind of etching or fading or staining, because the color is actually locked in the quartz crystal and doesn't wash out, and the pigment is a little bit more durable, and it's also more of a uniform color. It's more expensive, of course, but it's going to give you a better look than colored plaster. So I would go with quartz for sure. And then, of course, I would go with a Pebble Tech pool if you really wanted a uniform color. And I'll touch on Pebble Tech pools in a minute here. But as far as plaster, that's the first thing you're going to notice, is that the mottling can be extreme, and it could be something that is very disheartening to someone who has a new pool built. Now, how much does the startup affect the plaster? It affects it quite a bit. Now, there's different kinds of startup methods. You can pick whichever one you are using in your area, but having the startup completed correctly is really important into the overall turnout or the outcome of the plaster long term. For example, if you take over a pool, which I've done before, and they never did a startup, and you come in 3 months later, make sure you let the customer know, and you may want to create a waiver for this, that anything that happens later was not your fault because the pool was not started up correctly. What could happen later is you could have a lot of scaling on the plaster, and you could also have some etching because it might have been corrosive during the startup. Who knows what was happening during that time. But I really think a proper startup is important, and the longer you run the pool during the startup process, the better. I had this white plaster pool that for some reason I took over, didn't really do a proper startup, but I took over like 2 weeks in. But I did notice that the builder removed the on-off trippers and a timer. The customer was not in the country at the time, and so this pool actually ran 24 hours a day for like a 2-week period. And I got to tell you that this was probably the best looking plaster I've seen in a long time. It just was pretty pure. And I attribute that to the pool running 24/7 for that 2-week period and just continuously circulating the water and just giving it a really uniform look. Now, I can't say this will work for every pool, but in this case, I thought that was one of the factors that was contributing to it turning out so well. But there's been other pools where I've started it up. There's one pool in particular where, for some reason, don't ask me why, they filled the pool up and they had no equipment connected. This has happened before to other people as well. And it went probably about 2 weeks just sitting there with the water in there with no circulation. So the problem this pool had later was that it had, about 6 months later, it had really bad, massive calcium buildup on the surface, and it just started developing over time. And I think that's attributed to just sitting there for that 2-week period without any water flowing. It also had really bad mottling on the surface, and I attribute that to maybe the plaster dust or the plaster not curing properly because there was no circulation, and no one was brushing it either. So that's another problem. And I think not brushing the pool the first 2 weeks did contribute to some of that scaling, because I really think it was just the plaster dust on the surface that kind of became part of the pool because it wasn't started up correctly. So the startup does have a pretty major effect on a plaster pool. If you don't really know a good startup method, or if you're not wanting to do an acid startup or the Arenda startup, just do the traditional startup. Go to the National Plaster Council, download the traditional startup method, and just do the traditional startup, and the pool will turn out pretty. And the Pool Guy Podcast Show has teamed up with UPA to bring you affordable, reliable liability insurance starting at just $64 a month. Get up to $2 million in coverage, and the members of my coaching group get an even lower rate. Protect your business and your peace of mind. Sign up with UPA today by clicking the link in the podcast description. Good. Another problem with plaster is that it does stain pretty easily. Just like any pool surface, I should say, it stains pretty easily. So anything that falls in there could stain it. Trichlor tablets, rusty nails, toys that have metal in it could stain it. Another problem that plaster pool also has is that over time, the plaster may chip and crack. And this is many years down the road in most cases, but that's also something to note about plaster. It's the cheapest surface type. It's also probably the least durable surface type, and it kind of goes hand in hand. You go up to the next level and go to quartz, you're going to get a better surface type that lasts longer, that has less impurities, and has a better overall look. And then you go to the next level, which is pebble tech, which is really popular in my area as well. I like pebble tech because you have a uniform color. It's also a uniform look in the whole pool. It's a very durable surface type. Like, I've only had 2 pebble tech pools ever that I knew that had cracks in them. One had a crack in the spa. I think that was something with the build. Another one had a crack in the deep end of the pool, but usually it's intact and it lasts a very, very long time with no problems. Now, one of the problems you're going to have with pebble tech is that calcium buildup is a problem. And this is really hard to avoid because it's something, even if you balance the pool and keep it in the right LSI and you're just perfect and everything, the calcium's going to build up over time anyway because it is just river rock. And so the calcium's going to form in the crevices of the little rocks and kind of just take over time. Now, you may prevent a lot of this and slow it down tremendously by keeping the pool balanced in the LSI so it's not scale forming. But eventually, just like with your tiles, you're going to have scale forming on there over time, and it's going to need to be addressed. Now, how does the scale look on there, or how does the calcium buildup look on there, I should say? It turns the pebble tech kind of a white color. So if you have a really dark pebble tech pool, a black pebble tech pool, let's say, you'll start to see some fading in the color. And that fading is actually just calcium buildup on the surface. Maybe in the cove area of the pool, maybe on the step area. Certain areas are going to start getting this kind of white color or discoloration. Maybe not quite white, but it's going to turn the black a little lighter in certain areas. And this is just an indication that there's calcium built up there. Now, there isn't much topically you can do to fight this. You can try the Easy Care Butec and put a bottle in there and then put the maintenance dose, and that does limit it somewhat. But over time, it's just going to be part of what happens to the pebble tech pool. Now, you may be thinking, well, I'll just drain it and acid wash it, and then that'll take it back to its natural state and get rid of the calcium. It doesn't really work that way, because if you ever tried the acid wash tile with calcium buildup or a pebble tech pool with calcium buildup, the acid doesn't really penetrate and take off the calcium. It's just not made to do that. It's made to maybe take off stains and other things, but the calcium is definitely going to remain on there. So the best thing you can do, and this is an expensive thing to do as well, is have the entire pebble tech pool drained and then get it bead blasted by a professional bead blaster. The same companies that clean the pool tiles can actually use their equipment to clean the pebble tech surface and get rid of all the calcium on the pebble tech surface. If that's bothering the customer, then that's the solution. The bad news is you're probably going to have to do this like every 4 or 5 years, depending on the area you're in and the water quality and how hard your water is. And so it's not something that's going to cure it, and it's going to stay without calcium forever. Another problem with the pebble tech is that it's a little bit rough when you first get it put in, and you're going to notice that it's pretty rough around the step areas or anywhere where there's kind of a curve in the pool. And this, over time, does get a little softer, but the roughness is always going to be something that's there. You may want to look into pebble sheen if you find the pebble tech is too rough. It's similar, and it's not quite as rough, and you may want that option. But just note that it's going to be rougher and a little bit more. You can feel it more than a plaster pool, and that's another drawback with the pebble tech pool, is the roughness of the surface itself. And then for a pool that has zero roughness and that feels the best, in my opinion, would be a fiberglass pool. This is just a piece of fiberglass in there, and it's super smooth. It can be slippery, so be careful. And the fiberglass is really cool. I like the surface type. They do hold chemicals really well as well. The chemistry holds really well in a fiberglass pool. I should say the chlorine holds up well. And the pH stays pretty stable in there. It may tend to go to the low side versus the high side. But fiberglass is a great choice. The only thing that can go wrong with the fiberglass, of course, is that over time the gel coat starts to wear off. And so it may become powdery and cloudy. It may cloud up the pool when you brush it. And then the, not like Pebble Tech, the fiberglass pool may also form cracks in the surface as it gets older as well. But it's a great surface type, and it does stain very easily as well. So just be careful of the chemicals you're using in there. You don't stain the surface of the fiberglass pool. Don't use any trichlor granular. Avoid cal hypo granular if you can. And just, if you're going to use any kind of granular, dichlor would be the safest. And just use liquid chlorine basically in a fiberglass pool or a salt system as your primary sanitizer. And then vinyl pools are very similar to fiberglass pools. I like the feel of them. It's just a piece of vinyl in there, and it does stain very easily, so be careful of that. But they have really cool patterns you can have done with the vinyl pool, and I really like the patterns to make the pool look different, and it gives it a lot of class when you get a liner that has different patterns and colors in it. But of course, that can be ruined very easily with cal hypo, with trichlor, or anything that falls in there with any kind of metal. Of course, anything sharp should be avoided in a vinyl pool because there's really nothing underneath it except sand, and you could puncture that pretty easily. I've seen vinyl pools punctured actually by dogs with sharp nails on the step area, and they'll actually tear the vinyl liner with their nails. So be careful with anything sharp in the vinyl pool. But it's a great surface type. It's really smooth, and you really don't see any discoloration unless you create it by putting something in there and ruining the vinyl liner. But as far as the look of it, vinyl and fiberglass look great. They're a little less expensive than plaster, and the surface type doesn't last nearly as long. The vinyl liner, maybe you'll get 8 years out of it, maybe 10. And then the fiberglass, I would say after about 12 years, the gel coat starts to come off over time. And it's just part of the fiberglass pool itself. And so just be aware that that surface type, even though it's less expensive, doesn't last nearly as long as plaster, or Pebble Tech, of course, is the most durable and longest lasting surface type out there. Again, if you have a plaster pool and you see discoloration, it's probably normal mottling in there. If you have a fiberglass pool and see this discoloration, it could be a stain, could be a metal stain of some sort or an organic stain. Try using something like Biodex, Aquadex 50 to see if you can lift the stain out. If it's like a lot of brown staining in a fiberglass pool or vinyl pool, it's probably copper, and using ascorbic acid will remove that pretty easily. The nice thing about the fiberglass and vinyl pools is that the staining is removed very simply with ascorbic acid or even like some kind of treatment like the Biodex, Aquadex 50. In a plaster pool or a Pebble Tech pool, the staining is much more permanent and harder to remove. Now you can't acid wash a vinyl pool or fiberglass pool, but you can acid wash a Pebble Tech and plaster and quartz pool to remove any kind of stains in there pretty easily, or discoloration that's not mottling will definitely come out, and metal stains will also come out with an acid wash in those surface types. So just be aware that, the vinyl and fiberglass are more fragile, and the plaster pool is definitely durable, but not nearly as durable as a Pebble Tech pool or a quartz pool. You kind of get what you spend money for, and the more money you spend on your pool surface, the better your pool surface is going to be in the long run. I didn't cover tile pools because they're pretty rare. I've only had a couple of them on my route in my lifetime, but there are all tile pools as well. I like that surface, but the calcium buildup could be a problem as well. And I've had the tile pools where there was a lot of calcium buildup, not just on the surface area, but also under the water as well. And I can't speak too much on a tile pool because I don't have a lot of experience with them. Again, I just had 2 of them on my route. I felt like they held the chemicals pretty well, much like a fiberglass pool. And there wasn't much worry about staining the tile itself with anything. But again, it's not a super common surface type in my area. The ones I covered here are more common. If you're looking for other podcasts, you can find those by going to my website, swimmingpoollearning.com. On the banner, click on the podcast icon there. There'll be a drop-down menu with over 1,700 podcasts for you. And if you're interested in the coaching program, you can learn more at poolguycoaching.com. Thanks for listening to this podcast. Have a great rest of your week. God bless. This episode is brought to you by HASA, providing products that deliver clean, healthy water for every aspect of everyday life. The bottom feeder battery-powered vacuum system, portable, powerful, and only weighs 12 pounds. And Skimmer. Get Skimmer, America's #1 pool service software. Podcast listeners can try Skimmer for free at getskimmer.com/poolguy.